Hello, my name is Don Dagenet. I'm a volunteer preview speaker with the Kansas City Lyric Opera Guild, and I'd like to welcome you to this short preview of The Marriage of Figaro by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. This is the last production of the lyric opera in the Lyric Theater, a theater which the company has performed in for 40 years, and what a marvelous series of memories and productions the company has offered us in that theater. But next year offers great excitement as we're going to be moving into the Kaufman Center for the Performing Arts, which will change the world as far as the opera company is concerned. So for this last production in the Lyric Theater, the opera has chosen The Marriage of Figaro. Now why would that be? Well, the answer is that The Marriage of Figaro was one of those operas which the company performed in its very first season at the Lyric Theater all the way back in 1970. And it offers a nice bookend to the history of the company in this very historic theater. The Marriage of Figaro is not only one of the great works of the repertory, as you all know, but it also is a comic opera with an undercurrent of seriousness. The opera was written by Mozart and librettist Lorenzo da Ponte, based upon a play by Augustin Caron de Beaumarchais, famous French playwright, who wrote the piece in 1775, just a year before the French Revolution, before the American Revolution in 1776, and just a few years before the Revolution in France. The opera expresses an undercurrent of revolutionary fervor. In his three classic plays based upon a character named Figaro, the first is The Barber of Seville, of which you've heard, the popular opera by Rossini. In that classic trio of plays, Beaumarchais did something very radical on the French stage, and that is that he showed servants as well as members of the noble class, and the servants were the smarter ones. They were the ones who were outwitting the nobility. And this whole idea of the lower classes being equal to, or maybe even superior to, the upper classes was a very dramatic and very challenging and very revolutionary idea in France at the time. Historians of the French Revolution trace some of the intellectual origins of the French Revolution back to the famous playwrights of the day, including most prominently Beaumarchais, who presented this kind of challenging material on stage. As a matter of fact, in the original play by Beaumarchais, the character Figaro has a speech which is not replicated in the opera, but a speech in which he says to the Count, who is his antagonist in the opera, "I will defeat you, and the reason I will defeat you is that I have to use more wits and more cleverness and more smarts every day just to stay alive than you have to in your entire life. You were born to privilege, you have to do nothing, but I have to fight to stay alive, and that makes me better than you are." What a dramatic message to be sending the audiences of that era. Well, when Mozart and da Ponte wrote the opera for the stage, they toned down some of the political overtones because of the censors, but the underlying revolutionary current is very much there. So what we have is a story of a count and a countess, members of the noble class, who are having some marital difficulties. The count has his eye on a young maid named Susanna. Meanwhile, she's engaged to marry the count's valet, Figaro. And so we have a classic story where the young couple, Figaro and Susanna, who are being opposed by the count, are trying to circumvent him with the aid of the countess and trying to defeat his machinations and realize a happy marriage after all. And at the end, why everything works out fine. But it's a plot full of all sorts of topsy-turvy sort of beginnings and endings, and kind of a surprise revelation in the final scene, which leads to the happy conclusion at the end. And I need to share with you a secret here, as long as there's nobody else listening. Every comic opera has the same plot. Did you know that? I mean, you've got young man, young woman in love, want to get together, can't get together because of the machinations of a dirty old man. That's the basic comic opera plot. It's true of The Marriage of Figaro, as well as almost every other great comic opera ever written. So we have the comic story placed against the background of the battle of the classes and the whole thing about revolutionary France. So there's an undercurrent of seriousness beside the delicious opera. I should tell you also, by the way, that there's a hilariously comic character named Cherubino, a young adolescent boy whose hormones are just running away with him, who's falling in love with every woman he sees. Mozart saved some of his most delicious music for Cherubino, a role sung by a woman, by the way, but playing a young boy. And wonderful music that perfectly characterizes his attitude. As a matter of fact, the whole opera, musically speaking, is just a highlight video from beginning to end. Every bar of music is gorgeous. Mozart's ability to characterize his character's feelings and emotions with this delicious melodic invention of which only he seems to be capable is just extraordinary. Some of my favorite moments of the Marriage of Figaro come in small scenes off to the side. The Mozart almost threw away as afterthoughts, and yet they're full of gorgeous music. So certainly it is a wonderful musical experience as well as a great stage and comic experience for us to close our history at the Lyric Theater. So I know you will join me in enjoying The Marriage of Figaro. It has a noble ending where the Count begs the Countess for forgiveness and she gives it to him, one of the great endings in all of opera. And I think it's a parallel, one of the great endings of a long series of performances by this company in the last 40 years in this historic building. So everything has an ending, but it leads to something new. And next year, we will be enjoying the Kaufman Performing Arts Center. So I hope you're with me to honor the Lyric Theater and the company as it produces its final production, The Marriage of Figaro.